everyone, salam, namaste, adab, and welcome to today's event at Indian Diaspora, Washington, D.C. Metro. Today we are going to, basically it is a series starting with the 26 January, our Republic Day, which is going to happen just in 3 days. And the very first talk is on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. We are going to celebrate his 125th birth anniversary. So the topic of the talk is Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Hindutva. Main speaker is Ashish Tripathi, who is a senior journalist in Times of India. And guest of honor is daughter of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who is a professor at Augsburg, Germany, Professor Anita Bose. And we have 3 other items. We start with Sare Jahan Se Acha, then introduction will take place. After that, Ashish Tripathi will talk, then Danish will follow with a poem, and that's how it is going to happen. So, Aditya Mukherjee sir, please.
जी
पहले सॉन्ग होगा रजी भाई, आप म्यूट पे हैं.
Sorry, we are going to start with the song. Yeah. दानिश साहब, आपकी गर्ल्स जो हैं, हेलो, या आसिया
जी आसिया
जी सर
जी आसिया हमारी स्टूडेंट हैं मास कम्युनिकेशन रिसर्च सेंटर की, और उनके साथ उनकी बहनें हैं. ये सभी जामिया मिल्लिया के स्टूडेंट्स हैं. ये आपके सामने पेश करने जा रही हैं सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा.
सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा. हम बुलबुले हैं इसकी, ये गुलसितां हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा. सबसे ऊंचा हमसाया माँ का, पर्वत सबसे ऊंचा हमसाया माँ का, वो संतरी हमारा, वो पासबा हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा. गोदी में खेलती है जिसकी हजारों नदियां, गोदी में खेलती है इसकी हजारों नदियां, गुलशन है जिनके दम से, गुलशन है जिनके दम से, रश के जिना हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा. मजहब नहीं सिखाता आपस में बैर रखना, मजहब नहीं सिखाता आपस में बैर रखना. हिंदी है हम वतन है, हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा। हम बुलबुले हैं इसकी, ये गुलसिता हमारा हमारा सारे जहां से अच्छा। हिंदुस्ता हमारा हमारा सारे जहां से अच्छा। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू।
Aditya Sahab?
Ji, I'd like to start by thanking Razi Saab and the Washington Diaspora Group for organizing this event in memory of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on his 125th birth anniversary. I particularly thank them for inviting such a distinguished panel to speak on him today, about him, and also on focusing on the disingenuous effort by the Hindutva forces to appropriate the legacy of Subhash Bose. The Hindu communal forces are not only trying to appropriate his legacy and cash in on his huge popularity, which was on par with that of Gandhiji, Nehru, Bhagat Singh. They want to cash in on that, A, and B, are trying to use Subhash Bose, use his differences on certain issues with these leaders in order to denigrate these leaders, people like Nehru and Gandhi, and are in a way, they're also trying to delegitimize the national movement of which they were not only not a part, but they actually opposed the movement. The values, I don't need to talk about that. The recent effort by the government, for example, they said that they are going to uncover a huge amount of archival documents which will show Nehru's nefarious moves vis-a-vis Bose. And once those documents were uncovered, naturally nothing came out because the documents proved exactly the opposite. But I'm not going to talk about that. The values that Bose stood for and is remembered for are, if I may just list them, courage and patriotism, sacrifice, commitment to secularism, Hindu-Muslim unity, commitment to caste and gender equity, equal rights for all languages and regions, and lastly, and equally importantly, socialism. Each of these values, the Hindutva forces stand against. So all Bose's values are exactly the opposite of the Hindutva forces. Their icons, the Hindutva icons, people like Savarkar, did exactly the opposite. Moment they were arrested, they started apologizing to the British. He took, in fact, a pension from the British. He mobilized recruitment of soldiers for the British Army when Bose was organizing the Indian National Army to fight against the British. I mean, one could just go on. Bose himself, in very clear terms, condemned both minority communalism. He condemned Jinnah, the Muslim League, Savarkar and the Hindu Mahasabha, and said that they were collaborators of the British and their moves actually stood against the Indian national movement. He did not see Muslims as foreigners. These days, it's very important to say so because even our Prime Minister says that we had 1,000 years of foreign rule, by which he obviously means Muslim rule. Bose did not believe in this. He, in fact, picked up the icons. Look at the icons he picks up. He picks up the springing tiger of Tipu Sultan and Gandhiji's charkha as icons to be used for the INA badges and flag, etc. Nehru and Gandhi, who the current regime seeks to pit against Bose, had great respect for Bose, despite their differences. Nehru was, of course, a personal friend of Bose, a fact that is that should be very well known. In fact, in his Kolkata house, there was a room which was called the Nehru room. because whenever Nehru would come, he would stay in Bose's house. This is a fact that Sugata Bose, the famous Harvard professor, who's the nephew of Subhash Bose, he narrates this incident often. This fact that there was a room in their house called the Nehru house. Nehru and Gandhi, both of them, repeatedly praised Bose for his courage and patriotism. I must underline that it was Gandhi who called Bose a prince among patriots. They admired his capacity to bring together people of all religions, all languages, all genders together in his INA, and his ability to bring people together is something they repeatedly admired. I want to underline the fact that they sought his advice even after they had parted ways on important issues, and they both regretted the fact that at independence, they did not have Bose with him to try and build a secular and just India. Bose's inclusive national greeting, Jai Hind, was taken up by Nehru, and Nehru always ended all his speeches with this national greeting. Bose, on his part, was the first one to call Gandhiji the father of the nation. They're supposed to, the way they try to pit them against each other. He named the brigades of the Indian National Army after Gandhi, Nehru, Maulana Azad, and Rani Jhansi. If there was such a big difference, he wouldn't do that. He told the INA soldiers that when they entered the Indian soil, he would not be their commander-in-chief. Gandhiji would be their commander-in-chief. Subhash Bose was an inspiration not only in India, but to all oppressed people of the world. I will end with quoting Nelson Mandela. On his first visit to India after he was released from prison in 1990, he says the following, and it sums up, I think, what we want to emphasize today. He says, "Your heroes of those days became our heroes. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was amongst the great persons of the world whom we black students regarded as being as much as our leader as yours. Indeed, Netaji," he said, Mandela says, "united all militant youth of all the colonially oppressed people. We followed with pride his great contributions as we did that of the Mahatma and Pandit Nehru. Such a man with such wide appeal cannot be appropriated by narrow sectarian communal forces. The best tribute we can pay today to Netaji is to resolve to do our best to fight these divisive anti-national forces." Thank you for this opportunity to pay my little tribute to Netaji. May I now request Shri Ashish Tripathi to deliver the main talk of the day. Shri Ashish Tripathi.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. In fact, you have said everything which I wanted to say, and I will take on from, I will only elaborate what you said, and my target audience is the younger generations who are not mainly aware. You all are learners, scholars, and you know what the truth is. But these people, the younger lot, they are often carried away by these conspiracy theories. As we speak, there is a tweet from ANI quoting the nephew of Subhash Chandra Bose, saying that it was not the peaceful movement of Gandhi that brought independence, but it was Netaji, and he's quoting from General G.D. Bakshi's book. Anyway, greetings to all those who are present on this special occasion. And this is a historic occasion because not only Netaji's daughter is in this here, but also Mahatma Gandhi's granddaughter is sharing the stage. So we can see that two giants, the descendants of the two giants, are again together. So let me first explain why I have chosen this topic today. We can divide leaders and ideologies into two categories, broadly into two categories. One who inspire and unite, and other who incite and divide. Netaji comes under the first category, definitely. and Hindutva falls in the second. Netaji was strictly against any celebration on his birthday. He used to tell his followers that ideas should be propagated and not personalities, because ideas never die. Netaji's idea of India was based on liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, and unity. He was against British imperialism and not against British people. He was constitutional nationalist, not a religious nationalist. He took constitutionalism and democracy, these concepts from British, and used imperial powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan against imperial Britain. However, when we see the Hindutva forces sided with British imperialism, supported them, worked as their agent as divide and rule policy, and at the same time adopted the concept of racist and religious supremacy from Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. So this clears some people criticize Netaji for taking help of Hitler and Japan. So this, if they will read here in clear terms, denounce imperialism, be it by Germany or Britain, by any power. But the irony today is that Hindutva has managed to appropriate name of Netaji, projected him as Hindu icon, and position itself as his true follower. And this they have done to hide the fact that they played no role in India's freedom struggle and to sanctify their religious nationalism. What are the factors which are responsible, which I want this young generation to know? One is that Congress in action, I would say that Congress that ruled the better part of this country after independence neglected all freedom fighters except for Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. In fact, they even abandoned their value systems after Nehru's death. And Congress and other parties did not do much to clear doubt in public mind about Netaji's mysterious death. This provided Hindutva an opportunity to appropriate most of the freedom fighters and reformists, including Netaji, which apart from other social and economic political reasons helped in its growth. 2 generations after independence did not fall into this trap because they knew the reality. However, the generation which grew up in and after 90s, although looked upon the icons of this freedom struggle with reverence, but had limited or no knowledge of their progressive values. Hindutva used this ignorance to expand its base. And the advances in electronic, digital, social media, etc., made its reach more effective. As we all know, this nationalism is a sentiment that is strongest among all emotions in the masses. Most people don't know the difference between nationalism and patriotism, and happily accept sufferings, even if it is on account of bad governance, if told that it is for the sake of the country. Hence, Hindutva mixed religion with nationalism. And when you listen to speeches of Hindutva leaders, you will find a common theme. They start by invoking a national icon, followed by a call to serve the country, and then go on to equate Hindus with nation, before ending with demonizing Muslims by holding them responsible for the partition of India and labeling them as pro-Pakistani. Similarly, they discredit secular parties among Hindus by accusing them of resorting to Muslim appeasement to get their votes, and after coming to power, resort to corruption and nepotism. And how Hindutva did manage to make mark in the public mind. Hindutva used distortion, heavily relied on distortion of history and conspiracy theories to change public perception. In my student years, I too was a victim of these conspiracy theories. But after reading Netaji's autobiography, which is in 2 volumes, his speeches, his biography by Professor Sugata Bose, who is a historian, and his grandnephew, and the work of Professor Shamsul Islam, he's also an historian, I realized that all these theories were to hide Hindutva role in freedom struggle from the public eye. Now let's see what are these conspiracy theories are. First, as Professor Mukherjee has already mentioned, they are using Netaji against Gandhi. The conspiracy theory goes like this, that Mahatma Gandhi forced Netaji out of Congress because the latter was becoming more popular than him. Yes, Gandhiji was instrumental in Bose sidelining within the Congress, but that was not because he was getting more popular, but because they had sharp differences on what path the organization should take to attain freedom. It was Gandhiji who supported Netaji's candidature as president in 1938 of the Congress, but opposed re-election in 1939 due to political differences that cropped up in a year. In fact, the old guard of Congress teamed up against Bose, while his leftist supporters, including Nehru, remained neutral. However, upon reading personal correspondence between Mahatma and Netaji, one finds that the two shared, although they openly criticized each other, but they shared a bond of love, respect, and admiration. As Professor Mukherjee has said, Netaji was the first one to hail Mahatma as the father of the nation. It was in a speech on July 6th, 1944, when he was launching an offensive, major offensive, and he sought his blessings, Mahatma's blessings. Earlier to it, when Kasturba Gandhi died in jail, Netaji paid homage to her by describing her as the mother of all Indians and castigated the British for ill treatment they gave to her. He even called upon Indians to avenge her death by destroying British rule. On the other hand, Gandhi called Bose his rebellious son, a prince among patriots, as Professor Mukherjee said, and an ideal Hindu who regarded all religions worthy of respect. Gandhiji also said that greatest lesson that can be drawn from Netaji's life is the way he united people of all communities and inspired them to shed blood together for a common cause. Here I must emphasize shedding blood here is sacrifice and not spilling blood for the want of power. The second conspiracy theory that Nehru conspired to get Netaji killed by suggesting to the British after World War II that if Bose is alive, he should be tried as a war criminal. A fake letter was also circulated in this regard. The theory defies logic because the entire India would have revolted against Nehru if he had done any such thing. People are also told that were told in 2015 that this declassification of Netaji files will prove Nehru's culpability, but nothing substantial has come so far. On the contrary, upon reading their autobiographies and personal correspondence, we learned that they were very good friends. And in fact, both had left leanings. They worked together and to make Congress adopt the resolution of absolute freedom from British Raj in its Lahore session in 1930. It was January 26th, and January 26th prior to independence was celebrated as Independence Day. And after independence, it was chosen that this date was chosen to adopt the constitution because this resolution, because of this resolution, the importance of the day. Again, another example of their affinity. In the mid-30s, during exile in Europe for treatment of his gallbladder stone, when Netaji came to know that Nehru's wife Kamala is also in Europe for the treatment of tuberculosis, and Nehru could not escort her because he was in jail, he rushed to ensure that Kamala gets best of treatment. Later, upon being released, Nehru came to Europe to take care of his wife. Netaji was by his side all the time. Unfortunately, Kamala could not survive. Netaji then, along with Nehru's daughter Indira, arranged for the funeral. On the other hand, when Netaji's commanders, Colonel Prem Sehgal, a Hindu, Colonel G.S. Dhillon, a Sikh, and Major General Shah Nawaz Khan, a Muslim, were tried for treason by British in the famous Red Fort trial after the end of World War II, Nehru donned the barrister robe after a gap of 25 years to be the part of their legal defense team. In his first address as Prime Minister from the Red Fort after independence, Nehru in his speech took names of only two leaders, Mahatma Gandhi and Netaji Bose. Another conspiracy theory that is that the Netaji survived the plane crash and lived incognito disguised as a sannyasi known as Gumnami Baba or Bhagwan Ji in Ayodhya out of fear of being tried as a war criminal. Again, this theory defies logic because Netaji was not a coward who would have been afraid of any trial. But there was indeed a one Gumnami Baba in Ayodhya who died in 85, and this theory was circulated after his death. Interestingly, it coincided with the launch of Ram Temple movement, whose epicenter was Ayodhya. The idea perhaps was to establish that Netaji chose to be a Hindu sadhu and retire in Ayodhya, the birthplace of Lord Ram. A morphed image of Netaji was also used to show that Gumnami Baba resembled Bose. But even after several inquiries, nothing has been proved so far. On the contrary, it came out that the residence where Gumnami Baba lived was owned by the family of a BJP leader whose grandfather played a crucial role in illegally installing the idol of Ram, idols of Ram Lala inside Babri Mosque in 1949. The most preposterous conspiracy theory is that Netaji escaped from India and formed the Indian National Army or INA on the suggestion of Hindutva ideologue and Hindu Mahasabha President V.D. Savarkar. The fact is that when Netaji was Congress president in 1938, he desperately tried that Muslim League chief M.A. Jimma and Savarkar join hands and cooperate in freedom movement, but they both rejected his offer. Later, after taking charge of INA and the launch of Quit India movement, he again requested through his appeal in a radio broadcast from Azad Hind Radio that to be part of the struggle and stop compromising with British. But both refused again and joined hands to form Muslim League and Hindu Mahasabha coalition governments in 3 provinces of India after the fall of Congress government, or the resignation of Congress governments. Savarkar also organized camps to recruit thousands of Hindus for the British army who would later fight against the INA. Now, who conspired to kill Netaji? I leave it to the audience. Historical evidence also shows that Gandhi, Nehru, Bose shared the same idea of India. However, even if we believe these conspiracy theories to be true, still Hindutva is entirely opposite to Netaji's ideology. How? Let's see Hinduism, his version of Hinduism. Netaji was a proud Hindu and his source of inspiration was Swami Vivekananda's teachings, particularly the concept of salvation through selfless service to humanity. In his autobiography, he has written that he believes in an eclectic and cosmopolitan version of Hinduism that seeks to assimilate all what is good and useful in other cultures and religions. He rejected all that is narrow, regressive, and discrimination. He wrote, and I quote, after studying various philosophies and based on his personal experience, I have come to conclusion that love is the essence of the universe, an essential principle in human life, unquote. Hindu Rashtra. As early as January 1928, Netaji rejected the idea of Hindu Rashtra proposed by V.S. Munje, mentor of RSS founder Heglewa. He called this idea as disastrous. He said that he believed that India's future depended on ensuring dignity to all minorities. He said that multiple identities were not an obstacle to achieving an overarching national unity. In fact, in 1924-25, as Chief Executive Officer of Calcutta Municipal Corporation, Netaji implemented reservation for Muslims in jobs so that they can equal representations. As Congress President in 1938 and 39, he banned dual membership. That is, no member of Hindu Mahasabha and Muslim League could become a member of an elected committee of the Congress. He was also of the view, and that is Hindutva icon Shama Prasad Mukherjee has recorded in his diary, that Netaji was of view that if required, these communal forces should be crushed with force. What are the thoughts of Netaji about Muslim rulers? Professor Mukherjee has already highlighted this point. I would only say in his autobiography, Netaji has rejected the segmentation of Indian history into eras of Hindu rule and Muslim rule as written by British historians. He called the theory of Hindu-Muslim as two separate nations as artificial creation. He made it clear that unlike British rulers who invaded India only to plunder its resources, the Muslims made India their home and contributed in its development. He has written that occasionally a fanatical ruler would attempt religious conversion, but on the whole, the administration of Mughal emperors or Muslim kings and had Hindus and Muslims as ministers and generals and did not interfere in the life of the ordinary citizen. He said that though Muslims did not accept the religion of Hindus, but both shared their joys and their sorrows, giving rise to a composite culture, which was different from the old but distinctly Indian. However, regarding British, he said, the British looked upon India as the source of raw material and the market for their finished goods. As a result, the Indian people began to feel for the first time in their history that they were being dominated culturally, politically, and economically by those who are alien to them. Netaji also describes Mughal Emperor Akbar as great, who infused a cultural synthesis that took India once again to pinnacle of progress and prosperity. Now compare his ideas with that of the Hindutva leaders do you often hear in their speeches. What kind of relations Muslims had with Netaji? when Netaji escaped from India, he was held by a few close family members and two Muslim confidants, Akbar Shah and Muhammad Shah, who arranged for his residence in Afghanistan and later helped him to cross over. When he carried out the dangerous voyage from Germany to Japan through a submarine, he was accompanied by a trusted Lieutenant Abid Hassan. On July 2, 1943, when Netaji landed in Singapore, he was welcomed with a song composed by Mumtaz Hussain describing him as a Shan of India and Asia Ka Aftab. After taking charge of, and again, when Netaji had to retreat to live, to fight another day, he left the charge of Aine with Major Kiani. Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar. On the occasion, he also recited the famous the couplet, the Urdu couplet of Bahadur Shah Zafar. गाजियों में बू रहेगी जब तक तलक ईमान की, तख्त लंदन तक चलेगी तेग हिंदुस्तान की. The literal meaning is different, but my spiritual meaning of what I have come to conclusion is, as long as righteousness is alive in human beings, the fight against injustice will continue. Netaji's political ideology and how he implemented in the INA. Netaji's political ideology was socialism, and he described it through the ancient Buddhist term Samyavad, which means equal rights and equal status to all. He said that fanaticism is the greatest thorn in the path of cultural intimacy, and there is no better remedy for fanaticism than secular and scientific education. He gave equal representation to all communities, including women in his government. Rather than having a Hindu mess or a Hindu-Muslim mess, Netaji ensured that INA soldiers of all communities dined together. He adopted Jan Gan Man by Guru Rabindranath Tagore as national anthem and tricolor with Gandhi's charkha as national flag. The INA motto was Ittimad, faith, Ittifaq, unity, Qurbani, sacrifice. 3 words from Urdu, the language Hindutva despises. Here I would like to specially point out 2 famous songs of INA, Kadam Kadam Badhaya Ja and Hum Dilli Dilli Jayenge. Listen to them carefully. The first line of the 3rd stanza of Kadam Kadam Badhaya Ja is Teri himmat badhti rahe, Khuda teri sunta rahe. And the 4th line of the 4th stanza is Hum Dilli Dilli Jayenge is Khuda bhi hamara sathi hai. Both have the word Khuda, which in Persian means God Almighty. For Netaji, God called by any name remains God. It echoed the sentiments of Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Ishwar Allah Tero Naam. Even INA's slogan, Jai Hind, gave the message of unity. It is the composition of Jai, a Hindi word of Sanskrit origin, and Hind, an Urdu word of Persian origin. And in the end, I will leave you all with a question, especially the younger generation. What do you think Netaji would have done if he was alive to the ideology which is responsible for Mahatma Gandhi's assassination and now bulldozing his idea of India? My answer is that Netaji would have united people with love, faith, and sacrifice, and organized and launch a struggle against the atmosphere of hate we have in India. If you agree, please follow Netaji's path and start Netaji versus Hindutva debate in all your circle. It's time to reclaim him from fanatic forces. Jai Hind.
MashaAllah. Ashish, done so well. It's inspiring talk, and really it is loaded with message. That's what is needed in today's India. And I hope that people will carry this message to their respective quarters. And now it is our pleasure to invite our guest of honor, Professor Anita Bose, who is the daughter of our dear Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose. Welcome, madam.
Jai Hind, and thank you for having me on this program. Well, there are 2 distinguished speakers who have just enlightened us, leave me in a difficult situation, because I agree with them on most of the things they said, and they both really expounded it in a very erudite and very clear manner. So what can I contribute to that? I'm a professor of economics, or was a professor of economics until my retirement. So my own on the social policy and health policy specialist. So my own expertise will not be very useful in this context. So I have to sort of give you a more personal presentation and response, and maybe a couple of comments on the previous two lectures. Netaji certainly was a very tragic hero and also a very lucky man at the same time. A tragic hero insofar that he sacrificed a lot, dedicated himself to his country's independence, and that was his first and his second and his third love, and anything else came after that. My mother probably was the person who had to suffer from that attitude the most. He was a very lucky person insofar that I think it is quite unusual to observe the degree of admiration, of respect, and I would say even love, that his countrymen and countrywomen who have never seen him, who have not lived at the same time, who have lived under totally different circumstances, who have only experienced India as a free country and not as a colony, still respect him and the sentiments they have towards him. I think a person who can inspire this kind of feeling is a very lucky person. Not only a sad one. Of course, he was a tragic hero also in the sense that he did not live to see India independent, or you might say he maybe was not so unlucky not to experience that, because partition would have been a terrible thing for him to live with. Of course, we can only speculate whether he could have made a difference, whether maybe joining forces with the other great leader of the freedom struggle, Mahatma Gandhi, who was also opposed to the partition of India. And I always felt it a bit tragic that at the end, after sort of having the almost absolute power in Congress and being able to decide what should be done, Gandhi in a way was sort of left alone by the Congress leadership, and the others went ahead with partition. Of course, we are looking back on history and we don't know how the situation was if you experienced it at the time, but I think it was very tragic. But I'm quite convinced that if Netaji had been alive after independence, and if he had not been able to prevent the partition, he certainly would have had and insisted on enough influence of India's policies towards Pakistan that the relationship of these two countries would have been different in nature. That is one comment sort of on the previous contributions. The other one I would like to address is the question of the relationship between the three leaders you mentioned, Gandhiji, Panditji, and my father. I think you very clearly said that Panditji and my father were friends, and you quoted some of the examples for that. I would sort of qualify that a little bit in the sense that they were friends, particularly the fact that Netaji took care of Kamala Nehru when she was sick, and that he was present when she passed away, and he helped the Panditji to arrange, make the arrangements for her funeral and all that, showed that they were very close to each other. It was a disappointment to Netaji that Panditji did not stand up against Nehru with him, because these were the two, at that time, modern leaders, if you put it that way, who had very similar ideas, but who were in favor of modernization of India, who were in favor of a secular state, even though at least Netaji was a very devout person and was a devout Hindu. And from that point of view, I think also respected the other religions. But they were both socialists, essentially, in their economic and political views. And I think this is a fact which has to be emphasized, particularly with relation to Netaji. Some people sort of throw him into one pot with the right-wing nationalists or chauvinists, because he sided or he sought the help of fascist states to gain support for India's struggle for independence. I'm a social democrat myself, so being in favor of a fascist regime is very far from what I would favor. But you have to also keep in mind what was the option. Those who really are very critical of Netaji because he tried to get the support of Hitler Germany and of the fascist state of Japan, should tell me to whom he could have turned. Of course, you might say, okay, he might have rotted in jail and done nothing and left things as they were. I don't think that was an alternative which he was in favor, particularly because he could not side at all with the views that were upheld by some of the other Congress leaders to sort of follow in what you might call appeasement policy vis-a-vis the British Empire, by saying, okay, we will support you in your fight against Nazi Germany because we are against the fascist system, and we will support that, but we expect that you grant India independence after the end of the war, after the fascist powers have been defeated. Well, we know what happened. It landed all of the leadership in jail. And in essence, for many years during the Second World War, they could not affect the independence movement very strongly because they were handicapped by being in jail. So Netaji definitely chose a different path because he said, unless I'm out of jail and for that matter out of the country, I cannot do anything for my country. And so he didn't have much of a choice. Of course, we also know that he might have preferred the support by Soviet Russia. And of course, you might say, if seeking Hitler's help was a pact with the devil, seeking Stalin's help might not have been much better. But anyway, it's mute because as history developed, the Soviet Union could not have supported India, and it might not have been a very favorable thing either. If you remember, those of you who have studied the European part of the history, the Hitler-Stalin Pact had a secret agreement which was not known at the time. And the two authoritarian systems sort of tried to divide up part of the world between themselves. And Nazi Germany very graciously sort of left India to the Soviet Union. So, I mean, Netaji's choices were not great, but since he was an unconditional champion of freedom for India, he chose these sometimes criticized steps. And I certainly know that from many of the things he also said in private, he was not in favor of a racist system like these two countries espoused. but he hoped that they would help India. And to some extent, of course, that was true. Nazi Germany helped him in so far that they allowed him to set up an Indian Legion, which was a bit of a blueprint for his development of the INA in Southeast Asia. And the Japanese, of course, supported him in the campaign of the INA. But I think Netaji certainly was maybe the most unconditional champion for independence for India, and he did not compromise in any respect in order to follow that goal. He was willing to take many risks, as you already pointed out, or the two speakers pointed out, to follow that. And ultimately, I mean, the risks were sufficient that he died as a consequence. We have some ideas what Netaji would have envisaged for the country, and you referred to his readings, to his writings, and I would not only refer to his unfinished autobiography, but also to his political writings, like the Haripura Congress address and some of the other articles that he wrote on the subject. Of course, if you look at all the details, you will find that some may not be relevant today, but it's quite surprising that a number of the aspects that he addressed at that time have not lost their relevance. And I would wholly agree with you that in all his writings, his ideas, the basis of his own thinking and his action ultimately, he was opposed to communal disharmony, conflict, and strife. And I think the way he influenced the Indian National Army showed in the most clear fashion how important it was for him to have communal cooperation. And what may surprise some, he succeeded in that. Because in the beginning, not all the officers and soldiers were quite naturally of that opinion, but they saw it could be done and would be done. And they learned to sort of reach across the communal lines. And evidently it was successful. Now, we may ask ourselves, how can it be that in a country which ultimately has a lot of basis of pacifist strains in religions, particularly, of course, in Hinduism and Buddhism, something like the massacres in connection with the partition did happen. And if I say he might have been lucky in some way not to live long enough, this is, of course, one thing. I think he would have been absolutely devastated if he had been in India at the time and could not have changed things. And if we look at Gandhi's initiative to try to sort of appease the conflict, we have to see that he could only do a very limited, could only reap a very limited success. The fact that I don't know how many were killed in that process is really a most distressing thing. And after all, this has not gone away completely. We have seen again and again that there were communal conflicts. And as you point out correctly, the present ruling party certainly did not play a role to prevent these developments. If anything, they sort of try to exploit it and strengthen the conflict. So in order to consider what message should be taken to the younger or also the middle-aged people, I think as you pointed out, Swami Vivekananda's idea of service was certainly a very guiding principle for Netaji. And I think ultimately in some smaller or greater way, everyone can serve the community, serve the country, serve the larger family, serve friends and so on. I think communities are sort of made alive and more successful, more pleasant if people do engage in a civil society in order to help others. And this is certainly one message we can take from Netaji. And the more content-related one maybe is the fact that we all have been talking about the relationship between the different religions. I think throughout the world, we cannot expect that things improve if hatred is preached. Only by a peaceful coexistence, by tolerance of others, will there be a basis for a greater well-being of any society, not only India. And as a woman, of course, I feel very gratified by the fact that my father was a champion of gender equality, and I would sort of tie that in also of emancipation of the, as he put it, downtrodden, both in cultural terms, that is lower castes, but also in economic terms, that is, let's call them unskilled labor, with very low incomes and very poor opportunities in terms of education and health. And to further their plight, to improve the situation, certainly would have been something important for him. And in that respect, I think India has also something to work on. I find it gratifying that India is considered or considers herself the largest or the most populous democracy. But of course, I'm not very happy about the fact that India also holds the doubtful reputation of being the country with the greatest violence against women. So I think there are a number of ideas that the young can take from Netaji, and in that sense, I'm very glad that he's not forgotten by the people, and I'm very thankful, particularly for the simple people, that they do remember him. Because it's very often these simple people who do not have an axe to grind and to seek an advantage through that. And this is, I think, the most important thanks that he receives by his countrymen and countrywomen. Thank you very much for your attention, and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Professor. Such an inspiring speech. And of course, we no doubt that in the couple of decades passed by, we have forgotten Netaji, but there is sort of revival for this iconic figure in the freedom struggle, and people like Chief Tripathi, Anand Kumar, and others are taking that mantle to people and re-educating them the value of Netaji's Subhash Chandra Bose. Thank you very much. Now the next part coming is a poem recited.
Raji Sahab, can I interrupt for a second?
कौन सा है?
मैं आशीष बोल रहा हूँ.
आशीष, अभी तो क्वेश्चन आंसर में हम बात कर सकते हैं.
नहीं, क्वेश्चन आंसर नहीं, मैं वैसे एक सजेशन था कि अगर इला गांधी भी कुछ 2 मिनट बोले तो और अच्छा हो जाएगा.
All right, that was okay. It's a brief expression if Ila Gandhi Sahib want to do, that will be fine. But I will request only a very brief commentary. Okay. Welcome, Ila Gandhi. Where are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me. I have tremendously enjoyed the inputs by all the speakers and also the beautiful, presentation at the beginning of this program. So I'm really enchanted by the entire program, greatly inspired by the speeches. Thank you very much. And it's really good to be here with such prominent people, such, informed speeches, especially some of the things that were said by Ashish ji, by Iqbal ji, and by Anita ji. I was really quite inspired by them. I think those are messages that the young people must take forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind words and the good message. And now I invite Professor Danish Iqbal from Jamia Islamia to recite a very famous poem written by Jagannath Azad, the famous Urdu poet, on Netaji Subhash Bose.
जी कहा जाता है कि नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस ने अपनी 45वीं सालगिरह से पहले रंगून में आजाद हिंद फौज के जवानों को मुखातिब करने का फैसला किया और हिंदुस्तान की जानिब बढ़ने से पहले नेताजी पहली जंग आजादी के मुजाहिद यानी 1857 के स्वतंत्रता सेनानी बहादुर शाह जफर की मजार पर गए, जिसका अभी हवाला आशीष जी ने भी दिया, जिनको अपने बिछड़े वतन, अपने प्यारे चमन में 2 गज जमीन दफन होने के लिए नहीं मिल सकी थी। नेताजी के साथ कहा जाता है कि आजाद हिंद फौज का एक चाकू चौबंद दस्ता था, जिसने मरहूम बादशाह को पहले फौजी सैल्यूट पेश किया और फिर ये दस्ता नेताजी को मजार पर अकेला छोड़कर बाहर मुस्तैदी के साथ संतरी बनकर खड़ा हो गया। वहां अंदर नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस ने कफन की जगह मिट्टी की चादर ओढ़े हिंदुस्तान के आखिरी बादशाह से क्या कहा और क्या क्या उनके जहन में गूंजा और क्या क्या उनके दिल में उमड़ उमड़ कर आया। जगन्नाथ आजाद ने, जैसे कि अभी आपको बताया गया, एक लंबी नज्म में वो एक एक जज्बा, वो एक एक लम्हा समो दिया और ऐसा सजा दिया कि इस नज्म को तारीख आजादी का हम एक शाहकार भी तस्वर कर सकते हैं। नेताजी ने बहादुर शाह जफर से इस नज्म के जरिए कहा, अब देखिए शायरी की जबान में सुनिए, अस्सलाम मैं अजमते हिंदोस्तां की यादगार, अस्सलाम मैं अजमते हिंदोस्तां की यादगार, ऐ शहंशाहे दयारे दिल फकीरे बेदयार। वो दिलों के ही बादशाह रह गए थे। कितनी खूबसूरत बात कही जा रही है, अस्सलाम मैं अजमते हिंदोस्तां की यादगार, ऐ शहंशाहे दयारे दिल फकीरे बेदयार, आज पहली बार तेरी कब्र पर आया हूं मैं, बेनवा हूं नजर को बेलौस दिल लाया हूं मैं, गर्दिशे तकदीर के हाथों वतन से दूर हूं, एक बुलबुल हूं मगर सहने चमन से दूर हूं। अब देखिए इसमें जो शायर ने नेताजी के दिल में जो जज्बात आ रहे हैं और जो जज्बात उनके रहे होंगे बहादुर शाह जफर के, उनका दोनों का बहुत ही खूबसूरत जो एक तवाजुन पेश किया है, एक कंपैरिजन पेश किया है, वो तवज्जो के लायक है। कहते हैं, गर्दिशे तकदीर के हाथों वतन से दूर हूं, एक बुलबुल हूं मगर सहने चमन से दूर हूं, शौक आजादी का मुझको खींच लाया है यहाँ, आज दुश्मन है जमीन मेरी अदू है आसमां, मैं भी हूं अपने वतन से दूर तू भी दूर है, हाँ रजाए पाके अज़दा को यही मंजूर है, मेरा दामन भी यहाँ की खाक से आलूदा है, फर्क सिर्फ इतना है मैं आवारा हूं तू आसूदा है, मेरे दिल को याद है, मेरे दिल को याद है अब तक वो 57 की जंग, जिसके बाद उस जमी पर छा गए अहले फरंग, मेरी नजरों में है मेरठ और दिल्ली का जवाल, जानता हूं मैं जो था झांसी की रानी का माल, मैं नहीं भूला अभी अंजाम नाना फड़नवीस, मेरी नजर में है कोशिशे नाकाम नाना फड़नवीस, दास्तां जैसी भी हो गुजरी वो सब मालूम है, तेरे दिल बंदों पे जो गुजरी वो सब मालूम है, ये वतन रौंदा है जिसको मुद्दतों अगियार ने, जिस पे ढाए जुल्म लाखों चरखे नाहंजार ने, जिसको रखा मुद्दतों किस्मत ने जिल्लत आशना, जिसने हर पहलू में देखी पस्तियों की इंतहा, आज फिर उस मुल्क में एक जिंदगी की लहर है। आज फिर उस मुल्क में एक जिंदगी की लहर है, खाक से अफलाक तक ताबिंदगी की लहर है। आज फिर उस मुल्क के लाखों जवां बेदार हैं, हुर्रियत की राह में मिटने को जो तैयार हैं। इसके बाद कहते हैं कि नेताजी ने कमर में बंधी दियाम से तलवार निकाली और मजार के पायतियाने रख दी, उसको छुआया और फरमाया, आज फिर है बेनियाम इस मुल्क की शमशीर देख, सोने वाले जाग अपने ख्वाब की ताबीर देख। आज फिर उस देश में झनकार तलवारों की है, कुछ निराली कैफियत फिर देश के प्यारों की है। ये नजारा आह लफ्जों में समा सकता नहीं, आंख जो देखती है लब पे आ सकता नहीं। फतह नुसरत की दुआओं से हवा मामूर है, ना रहे जय हिंद से सारी फजा मामूर है। मुझको ऐ शाहे वतन, मुझको ऐ शाहे वतन अपने इरादों की कसम, जिनके सर काटे गए उन शाहजादों की कसम, तेरे मरकत की मुकद्दस खाक की मुझको कसम, मैं जहां हूं उस फजाए पाक की मुझको कसम। अपने भूखे जां बलब बंगाल की मुझको कसम, हाकिमों के दस्ते परवर काल की मुझको कसम, मैं मैं तेरी खोई हुई अजमत को वापस लाऊंगा। ये एक वादा, एक इमोशनल वादा जो उन्होंने वहां पे किया, इसका बहुत हवाला मिलता है आजकल। कई बार ये बात हम लोग याद करते हैं कि उन्होंने कहा, मैं तेरी खोई हुई अजमत को वापस लाऊंगा, मैं तेरे मरकत पे नुसरत याब होकर आऊंगा। तेग हिंदी जिसका लोहा मानता है एक जहां, जिसकी तेजी की गवाही दे रहा है आसमां। तेग हिंदी जिसको मैंने कर दिया है बेनियाम, जिसका शेवा हुर्रियत केशी जहांगीरी है काम। आज फिर अपनी नजर जिसकी चमक से खेरा है, जिसकी ताबानी से रोशन एक जहान तेरा है। एक जजीरे के हंसी साहिल से जब टकराएगी, यहाँ जजीरे का मतलब ब्रिटिश आयल से है। तो जैसा कि अभी आशीष ने आपको बताया कि उन्होंने कहा कि यहाँ अंग्रेजों को हिंदुस्तान से नहीं निकाल देना है और इंग्लैंड तक जाके उनका आइडियोलॉजिकल मुकाबला करना है। तो तेगी हिंदी जिसको मैंने कर दिया है बेनियाम, एक जजीरे के हसी साहिल से जब टकराएगी, चैन से मुझको भड़कती आग में नींद आएगी, चैन से मुझको भड़कती आग में नींद आएगी। बहुत शुक्रिया, बहुत शुक्रिया।
वंडरफुल रेंडिशन, वाह 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 भाई। दानी साहब, आपने सुभाष बोस को आज सामने लाके खड़ा कर दिया और सलाम करते हैं जगन्नाथ आजाद को इनको। अब at the before we go to question and answer session, the last item of the session is basically our national anthem. So I will request all the audience to please stand up in front of your device, and I invite Asia and group for national anthem. Please.
Stand up. Everyone.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे, भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंग, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंग। तब शुभ नामे जागे, तब शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तब जय गाथा। जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे, भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे, जय हे, जय हे, जय 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 हे।